know I talk about the weather a lot, but how awesome was that 66, 68-degree day this past Wednesday? Wasn't that just wonderful? Almost as awesome as that day we had 3 weeks ago where we were crushed with snow, 5 degrees and minus 21 degrees wind chill. How great was that day, huh? Man, the weather around here is just phenomenal. You never know what to expect coming and going. It always keeps you on your toes. But a few years back, I remember we lived in the Cherry Hill subdivision at that time. We had a big snow that came in one weekend. But that fall, we had some young guys move into a house across the street from us. Ian, I met one of the young men, his name's Ian. And he had his two friends with him. And they had 2 cars and a big, manly truck. And so the snow came in, and we who had been living in the neighborhood came in Friday, knew that we had to get out Saturday to shovel off all the snow. And so we were doing that, but Ian and his 2 friends who had 2 cars and a big manly truck didn't do anything. Not a thing to address the snow out there. The only thing they did do was drive in and out of their driveway on that snow, packing it down with their 2 cars and their big manly truck. And I'm just watching this whole thing go down. I said, this is not going to go well for these guys. Well, Tuesday evening, I get home, I pull into our driveway in my really cool minivan, and I look across the street to Ian's house with his buddies, and there's one of them out there trying to chip away at the ice on their driveway. Now notice I said trying to chip away all the ice on their driveway. And when I saw him, I said, man, that's a dog, isn't it? He said, yeah, it is. He said, we've waited too long to get it up. And always being the optimistic, encouraging, glass half full kind of guy, I said, hey, and I heard in the news there's more snow coming this next weekend. I'm just feeling good about myself in that moment. And he yelled back, he said, yes, but this time we're going to be ready. This time we're going to be ready. The next time you come in contact with a person that you have an opportunity to invite them to begin following Jesus, are you going to be ready? Right now, I want you to think of someone you know. Someone you know personally, have a relationship with. And this person you know, this would be the person that you feel would have the least chance of ever believing and following Jesus. Your friend, whoever it might be, family member, whoever it is, because of maybe bad decisions they made in their life, because they just don't want anything to do with this Jesus spiritual stuff, because they're cynical, for whatever reason. But I want you to think of and envision in your mind this person that you know has the least possibility of ever beginning to believe in and follow Jesus. I want you to see their face. I want you to hear their voice. I want you to see them in your mind. And I want you to ask yourself if by some chance they would ever ask you something about Jesus, would you be ready to invite them to begin following Jesus? This morning in our passage, it's around 380 AD, Jesus on the move, teaching, healing, loving, when he's met by just such a person. He was a Roman centurion who was asking Jesus for help. I say this with me. A centurion asking Jesus for help. And we read from Matthew chapter 8, verse 5. When Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him asking for help. Now, a centurion in the Roman army was a non-commissioned officer in the army. He was in charge of 100 soldiers, centurion, 100 soldiers. And like our present-day company first sergeant in our army, he was a career soldier. And soldiers became centurions only after a number of years of service. He was probably tried and tested in battle. He's seen his comrades fall. He was dedicated, committed. He knew how to be a soldier, and it was his career and his life calling, and they were disciplined and tough. And to become a centurion was a great honor, and is even greater responsibility to watch over and care for 100 soldiers. Only the best of the best of the best made it to the rank of centurion. They were self-sufficient, self-assured. But because they were still human, hard things happened to them in life. Things they needed help with. And this centurion came to Jesus asking for his. And he says, Lord, my servant lies at home paralyzed and in terrible suffering. Now, this is really an amazing thing to hear. And what makes his request so unbelievable is that the Roman centurion, in the Rome Empire, the servants did not matter. They were just, no one cared if a servant suffered, whether he or she lived or died. They were just objects. And they only had value as long as they were able to serve. And if they came to the point they could not serve, too sick to serve, they were just cast out and thrown away and forgotten. And they'll go and get another servant to take their place. But this centurion obviously cared for his servant, maybe even loved his servant. And it's perhaps this kindness, this gentleness, this caring nature in his heart that really called Jesus' attention. And I want you to know there's a world out there which needs help out there. But for the best community in here to give them the help out there, we have to first be the best community in here. We have to be that church family that when we find out someone is hurting, that we reach out to them. And we pray for them, and praying is important, and we should pray for them. But I wonder if maybe we should do more than just pray for them. That we should text them, or heaven forbid, we go old school and actually call them on the phone. But maybe that's just the first step. But maybe the second step, the Jesus step, is that then we do some kind of thing, some kind of action, some kind of step into their lives to help them, to lift them up, to carry the burden that they're carrying on their soul shoulders. You know, we have an old saying, a friend in need is a friend indeed, right? We've all said that. But I want to make it just a little bit different, just to add a little bit more emphasis to it. A friend in need is a friend indeed. When we become friends indeed in here, we will be ready to be the friends indeed the city needs us to be out there, that our nation needs us to be out there, that our world needs us to be out there, that Jesus needs us to be out there. The centurion came to Jesus asking for help. But a centurion would have never come to Jesus in the first place if he did not believe that Jesus could actually help him. A centurion believes Jesus can help. I say that with me. A centurion believing Jesus can help. And Jesus said to him, I will go and heal him. The centurion replied, Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one to go, and he goes, and that one to come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. You see how the centurion lived his life? He understood, because he's a soldier, he understood authority. The centurion says to Jesus, hey, in my world, I have people over me. They have authority over me. And when they give me a command, I go into bed. He says, not only that, I have people under me. When I tell them to go, they go. When I tell them to come, they come. And this servant who's lying here suffering and in pain, whenever I've told them to do something, they do it. Jesus, that's the way it is in my world. That's why I assume it's that way in your world too. And when Jesus heard this, he was astonished, surprised, amazed, and said to those following him, I tell you the truth, I have not found anyone in all of Israel with such great faith. You know what gets Jesus excited? When he sees his children living and acting in faith. When one of his children believes that Jesus is who he says he is. When they believe that Jesus can do what he says he can do. You know, often Jesus would say to his disciples who followed Jesus closely, to his disciples who were Jewish and worshiped the one God, to his disciples who saw Jesus make the lame walk and the blind see and the deaf to hear, to his disciples who saw Jesus still the wind and calm the storm and walk on his water, to his disciples who saw Jesus actually raise Lazarus from the dead. But to his disciples, Jesus would often say, "O ye of little faith." But to this centurion who grew up in a home where they worshiped a pantheon of pagan gods, to this centurion who should have had no faith, was exactly the one who had great faith. And because of his great faith, this centurion just said to Jesus, just say the word, and my servant will be healed. So we find that a centurion has Jesus for help and believes Jesus can help, and he represents everyone who comes to Jesus for help. Say this with me. A centurion representing everyone who comes to Jesus for help. And here we go. I say to you that many will come from the east and the west, and will take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects of the kingdom will be thrown outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Boom! Drop the mic. If there's one thing I want you to remember this morning, one truth I want us to come to terms with is this. In our world, people who we would never expect to follow Jesus will, while people who we would expect to follow Jesus won't. Remember that person I asked you to think about at the beginning of our time together? That person you believed never could begin to follow Jesus? Jesus wants you to know that he may be doing something in their life even this morning as we're here worshiping in this space. That he may do something in our life tomorrow or the next day or the day after. That he may be working their lives in ways that we can't know and see or understand. Doing things in the spiritual realm, touching hearts, opening their minds to the possibility of Jesus. That person you believe has the least chance of believing in Jesus may be the very same person who is just waiting for you to invite them to begin to follow Jesus so that they can sit at the great feast as well. Then Jesus said that to the centurion, go, go. It will be done just as you have believed it would. And his servant was healed at that very hour. I mentioned that this had been a hard week for us, a couple weeks for us. And so we had to get an Uber once it was all finished to drive us to the airport. And he came and picked us up there in Zephyrhills, Florida, to take us to the Tampa International Airport. And I'm sitting in the front seat, and Kirsten and Carol in the back seat, and there's a man driving the car, Paul. And we began having a conversation. I said, Paul, how are you doing? He says, well, I guess, I'm okay. But I could tell the way he said he was not okay. I said, Paul, you don't sound like you're really okay. He said, well, no, I'm okay. I don't want any sympathy. I said, well, all right, well, what's going on? And he began to share his story. Back when COVID ravaged the world, he caught it. And he lay in a hospital bed for months. And they thought he was going to die. And no one could come visit him. No one could be with him. No one could come around him. He was quarantined and secluded. And he said, Scott, I got to the point that I just wanted to die myself. And I just wanted to die. I couldn't go on. But he said, but I lived. And now, because I lived, I feel like I've got a purpose in life. I said, Paul, you come from any spiritual kind of background? He said, no, I'm an agnostic. I'm an agnostic. But he said, I'm trying to explore my spirituality. I've been visiting different churches here and there. I said, well, Paul, the call of Jesus, if you're looking to follow Jesus, Jesus would go to people and he'd come to them and he'd say, come follow me. And then he would just keep walking. And he would let them decide for themselves in their lives if they would or would not follow him. I said, Paul, maybe you feel like maybe Jesus is calling you to follow him. He said, I'm searching. I'm searching. I said, well, I would encourage you to follow Jesus. And I said, check out the message, Sermon on the Mount from the book of Matthew. I said, read that and let me help you, and I'll text you and help you on your journey. If you have any questions, he said, man, that's great. I said, yeah, Paul, I'm a preacher, so you ask me questions. I've got answers, maybe not the best answers, but I've got a lot of answers. He said, man, thank you for that, Scott. Thank you. And he's began his journey to try to understand what it means to follow Jesus. And just yesterday, now, I told you all to turn the phones off. Okay, I left mine on for a purpose. All the sounds are down. Here's what he texted me yesterday. He says, I'm heading to church with another neighbor friend this Sunday, Catholic. Her brother is dealing with aggressive cancer, so I wanted to go and have a good prayer for him. Moving forward, and keep me posted on suggested readings. Paul. This is Decision Sunday. And we come now to that time that we make in this service specifically, that wherever you're at in your spiritual journey, to move forward in it, to begin to follow Jesus more closely. So I'm just going to ask you just for a few moments, we're not going to draw this out, just to bow your heads, close your eyes. Paul's on his journey. I had no idea I'd be having a conversation with him in that Uber driving to the Tampa International Airport. He was on the edge of life. He was ready to die. But you allowed him to live, and he's seeking for his purpose. Purpose that we can find only in you. And right now, as we're just here in this space, if you feel Jesus is calling you to follow him and you want to begin to follow him, you don't understand what all that means or what that will look like, but there's a sense that you feel him drawing you to himself. Just come forward and take my hand, and we'll pray. We'll pray together. that you would make that decision to follow Jesus. He's walking. He's calling, waiting. Or maybe you've been following Jesus, but it's been at a distance. You want to follow him more closely, strongly, passionately, fervently. Maybe your decision is for rededication, for recommitment. To come forward, take my hand, pray. Well, pray. You would begin to increase your following and never look back. A few moments. My mic's turning off. Dear God, our life is filled with decisions. And we're a sum total of all the decisions that we've made today. But you're still walking through the world. Your Spirit's still moving, inviting people, said, come follow me, come follow me. And some do and some don't. But to everyone who does, you promise them they'll be eating one day at the big banquet table, rejoicing with you. This past couple weeks, my mother-in-law is now there. Now they're with you. Help us to decide for you and follow you. Follow Jesus, follow you. And all God's people said, amen.